Scout Commander Krulvok slouched in his command chair aboard the Imperial survey vessel Rigid Order, absently scratching at the environmental suit that all Zaxians wore as both protection and status symbol. His vessel's designation felt particularly ironic today. There was nothing rigid or orderly about what he was seeing on his screens. "Run the analysis again," he commanded, his voice carrying the distinctive metallic resonance of someone speaking through an environmental filter. The ship's quantum computers hummed, processing the data for the 7th time. The results remained unchanged. Impossible, but unchanged. The third planet of this unremarkable yellow star wasn't just hosting life. It was drowning in it. The biosignature readings were off the charts, suggesting millions of distinct species coexisting in complex, interconnected systems. That alone would have been enough to mark the planet for quarantine and move on. After all, the Empire had long since proven that technological civilization could only arise in controlled, simplified environments. But then there were the radio signals, television broadcasts, satellite communications, clear evidence of an advanced civilization. "Display primary population centers," Krulvok ordered, and the holographic display shifted to show Earth's cities scattered across its surface like bioluminescent clusters. He leaned forward, his suit creaking slightly, and overlay ecosystem complexity indices. The image transformed, and Krulvok felt his throat tighten. The cities weren't isolated from the planet's riotous biodiversity. They were integrated with it. Parks and green spaces threaded through urban areas. Wildlife corridors connected fragments of wilderness. Even in the densest population centers, life found a way to thrive. "This violates everything we know about civilizational development," his second-in-command, Telrin, muttered. "According to all our models, they should have eliminated competing species centuries ago, during their industrial phase. It's the only way to ensure stable technological progress." Krulvok brought up another display, this one showing the planet's historical atmospheric data. "Look at these carbon readings. They did start down that path, but then they changed course. They're actually increasing their biological complexity while advancing their technology." A warning light flashed on his console, the automated system reminding him to follow standard protocol. For a discovery like this, procedure was clear. Log the coordinates, mark the system for future investigation, and continue the survey mission. The Science Council would review the data during the next evaluation cycle, perhaps in a few years. But as Krulvok stared at the impossible planet spinning slowly in his display, he knew he couldn't wait. This discovery challenged the very foundations of imperial doctrine. The Empire's entire structure was built on the principle that progress required control, that civilization could only advance by imposing order on chaos. This planet, Earth, according to its own broadcasts, proved that assumption wrong. His fingers hovered over the communication controls. Bypassing the chain of command would end his career. 3 generations of his family had served in the survey fleet. His own children were already enrolled in the academy. One transmission would destroy that legacy. On the screen, a massive storm system swirled across one of Earth's oceans. Instead of devastating the coastline it approached, the planet's complex systems would absorb and redistribute its energy. Life there had evolved not despite chaos, but in concert with it. "Commander," Telrin's voice carried a note of concern. "Should I prepare the standard survey report?" Krulvok took a deep breath, feeling the filtered airflow through his suit. "No," he said, and activated a direct channel to the Imperial Science Council. "This is Scout Commander Krulvok of the ISV *, Rigid Order *. Priority Override Protocol 7. I need to speak to the Council immediately." As he waited for the response that would end his career, he continued watching the blue planet turn. Somewhere down there, a species had achieved what his people had long thought impossible. They had built a civilization without sacrificing the very thing that had birthed them. The Empire would never be the same after today, and perhaps, Krulvok thought, That was exactly what it needed. Dr. Amanda Brooks had learned long ago that the most important discoveries often appeared as anomalies in the data. Still, when her quantum detection array picked up the first signs of the Zaxian fleet, she almost dismissed it as an instrument error. "Hey, Ryan," she called across the dimly lit monitoring room at NASA's Deep Space Detection Facility. "Can you verify something for me?" Grid Section 47 Alpha. Ryan Martinez wheeled his chair over, his coffee mug leaving a wet trail across the desk. He squinted at the holographic display, then sat up straighter. "That's not supposed to be there." "No," Amanda agreed, her fingers flying across the haptic interface as she refined the scan. "Whatever they are, they're using some kind of gravitational manipulation for propulsion. The ripples in space-time are subtle, but distinctive. The objects," she counted 17 distinct signatures, "were arranged in a precise geometric pattern just beyond Mars' orbit. Their movement was deliberate, almost ceremonial, as they maintained their formation while slowly advancing toward Earth." "Should we alert the Secretary of Defense?" Ryan asked, already reaching for the red phone. Amanda shook her head. "Not yet. Look at this." She brought up a secondary display showing electromagnetic readings. "They're not trying to hide. In fact," she manipulated the controls, filtering out background noise. "They're broadcasting. A lot." The alien transmissions filled the spectrum, encrypted but clearly detectable. Whatever these visitors were, they weren't here for a sneak attack. They were having a discussion, a rather heated one, judging by the intensity spikes in their communications. Hours passed as Amanda and her team worked to decode the alien transmissions. The breakthrough came not from their most sophisticated algorithms, but from a pattern recognition program originally designed to study whale songs. "Listen to this," Amanda said, playing the first partially decoded segment. The alien language emerged as a series of harmonics, almost musical in its complexity. The translation software rendered it in a flat, mechanical voice. "Cannot be natural. The biological diversity indices violate all known principles of evolutionary development. Request permission to implement quarantine protocols. Denied. The Council demands thorough investigation. If this aberration is genuine, the implications, with respect, excellence, maintaining sterile conditions will be impossible. The target world's atmosphere is contaminated with billions of microbial species alone. Our environmental systems." "They're afraid," Amanda whispered, a smile tugging at her lips. "Not of our weapons or our technology. They're afraid of our bacteria." Ryan leaned back in his chair, running his hands through his disheveled hair. "Should we still be worried? Even if they're not here to attack, their technology is clearly far beyond ours." Amanda brought up a live feed from one of their orbital telescopes. The alien fleet was now visible as a cluster of geometric shapes, their surfaces reflecting sunlight in patterns too regular to be natural. As she watched, one of the smaller vessels broke formation briefly before being herded back into position. "I don't think we need to worry," she said. "In fact, I think we might be in a stronger position than we realize." She pointed to another decoded transmission fragment. "Unprecedented adaptation to biological chaos. Subjects appear to thrive in contaminated environments." "I need to make some calls," Amanda continued, already reaching for her secure phone. "But not to defense. Get me Dr. Jack Reynolds at the Smithsonian, and see if you can find anyone who studied exoanthropology. We're going to need to understand how their civilization works." She paused, watching another burst of agitated communications ripple through the alien fleet. They were now spreading out in what she recognized as a standard scientific survey pattern, but they were maintaining twice the normal distance from Earth that their own protocols seemed to require. "You know what this reminds me of," she said to Ryan. "Those European explorers who first encountered the Amazon rainforest. They came expecting to find savages living in primitive conditions. Instead, they found cultures that had learned to thrive in one of the most complex ecosystems on Earth." She smiled again. I think our visitors are about to have a similar revelation. The alien fleet continued its careful dance around Earth, their transmissions growing increasingly agitated as each new scan revealed another layer of complexity in the planetary ecosystem they were supposed to be studying. And in her quiet monitoring room, Dr. Amanda Brooks began preparing humanity for its debut on the galactic stage, not as conquerors or victims, but as something the aliens clearly hadn't expected, masters of complexity itself. Dr. Jack Reynolds stood in the Smithsonian's Butterfly Pavilion, watching the Zaxian ambassador's environmental suit gleam under the artificial sunlight. The ambassador's delegation huddled near the entrance, their metallic suits reflecting a rainbow of colors as dozens of butterflies fluttered around them. Perhaps, the ambassador's translated voice crackled through his suit's speakers, "We should conduct this meeting in a more controlled environment." Jack smiled, casually brushing a monarch butterfly from his shoulder. "With respect, Ambassador Vex Toll, this is a controlled environment. Every species in this pavilion has been carefully selected. The ecosystem here is a perfect example of what we'd like to discuss." The ambassador's suit vents hissed, their equivalent of an uncomfortable sigh. Behind him, 3 junior diplomats monitored their suit readings with increasing agitation. Jack had done his homework. He knew the Zaxians hadn't experienced an environment this biologically diverse in centuries. "You misunderstand," Vex Toll said. "Our protocols require sterile conditions for diplomatic exchanges. This," he gestured at a flowering plant, where several butterflies had landed. "This is chaos." "Is it?" Jack walked over to the plant, aware of how the Zaxians flinched at his proximity to the insects. "Look at this painted lady butterfly. Its wings inspired our most efficient solar panel designs. The iridescent scales." He pointed to a blue morpho resting nearby. "We replicated that structure to create color-changing materials without chemicals." A butterfly landed on the ambassador's shoulder, causing him to jerk back. His motion sensors blared a warning, and 2 security officers stepped forward. "Ambassador," Jack said quickly, keeping his voice calm, "that's a glasswing butterfly. Notice how its wings are transparent. We studied their anti-reflective properties to develop better stealth technology. It's not a threat. It's one of our greatest teachers." The security officers hesitated. Vex Toll stood perfectly still, staring at the creature through his suit's protective visor. "You learned from these organisms, voluntarily." "Of course." Jack gestured around the pavilion. "Every species here represents a solution to a problem that evolution solved millions of years ago. Why spend centuries trying to develop new technologies when nature has already done the research and development for us?" The ambassador's translator took several seconds to process this concept. "But the complexity, the variables, are exactly what make it valuable," Jack finished. He pulled out a small device, a prototype he brought for exactly this moment. "See this? It's a water collection system based on the Namibian desert beetle. The surface structure copies how the beetle harvests water from morning fog. We didn't need to design it from scratch. We just needed to pay attention." One of the junior diplomats broke protocol to speak. "Our historical records indicate your species once attempted to dominate your environment, to simplify it for technological progress. What changed?" Jack led them to a viewing window overlooking the Smithsonian's extensive gardens. "We realized we were thinking about it backwards. We thought we needed to control nature to advance. Instead, we learned to advance by understanding nature. Every species you see is a library of solutions, tested over millions of years." The ambassador's suit sensors were now recording everything, despite his earlier protests about contamination. "And your civilization accepts this collaboration with lower life forms." "Lower," Jack laughed. "Ambassador, some of these lower life forms can do things we're still trying to figure out. Photosynthesis more efficient than our best solar cells. Materials stronger than our advanced composites. Navigation systems more precise than GPS." He paused, letting that sink in. "We're not their masters. We're their students." A crowd had gathered outside the pavilion. journalists and scientists eager to witness this historic meeting. But Jack kept his attention on the ambassador, who was now watching the glasswing butterfly with an intensity that suggested he was seeing it with new eyes. "Your council asked why Earth wasn't devastated by its biodiversity," Jack said quietly. "The answer is simple. We didn't survive despite our planet's complexity. We thrived because of it. Every species you see here is part of our civilization's success story." The butterfly finally flew from the ambassador's shoulder, its transparent wings catching the light. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Vextool turned to his staff and said something the translators didn't catch, but his tone made it clear that the Empire's understanding of civilization was about to change forever. Lieutenant Emily Martinez knew something was wrong the moment she saw the potted plant in the young Zaxian's quarters. It wasn't just that personal vegetation was forbidden in the Imperial Center. It was the way Kexlar frantically tried to hide it when she entered for the routine cultural exchange meeting. "That's an Earth species, isn't it?" she asked, recognizing the distinctive leaves of a small jade plant. The succulent's thick, water-storing leaves would have been considered horrifically inefficient by Zaxian standards. Kexlar's environmental suit vents fluttered in what Emily had learned was their expression of anxiety. "Please," he said, his translator barely above a whisper, "don't report this. I'm already under investigation for unorthodox interests." Emily closed the door to his quarters, noting how the standard antiseptic white of the walls had been covered with illicit downloads of Earth's rainforests. "Tell me about the plant," she said, pulling up a chair. "I obtained the seeds from the black market," Kexlar admitted. "There's a whole network now. Young researchers trading Earth specimens. We're careful to maintain them in sealed environments." But he touched his suit's visor, a gesture Emily had come to recognize as profound emotion. "It's amazing. The plant adapts to stress. It changes its growth patterns based on available light. It's alive in a way our engineered crops never were." A distant alarm sounded, making them both jump. But it was just another environmental integrity check. The Empire's increasingly frequent attempts to detect unauthorized biological material. "They're going to find it eventually," Emily said gently. "You know that, right?" Kexlar's suit lights dimmed, their version of a nod. "Yesterday they arrested my research partner. She was caught trying to introduce Earth soil bacteria into a test plot. She said our agricultural systems are failing, that we need to relearn what your people know about complex ecosystems." Emily felt a chill. This wasn't just youthful rebellion. It was something deeper. Are they really failing? The agricultural systems. "Look at these readings." Kexlar projected a hologram showing crop yield data. "Our mono-engineered environments are becoming unstable. Pathogens evolve faster than we can develop countermeasures. Without diversity, there's no resilience. We're seeing the same patterns across all our colony worlds." More alarms sounded, closer this time. Kexlar quickly shut off the hologram. "They're coming. The environmental security forces. They must have detected the plant's transpiration signals." Emily made a quick decision. "Give me the plant. My diplomatic immunity will protect it." "You don't understand," Kexlar said, his translator struggling to convey his intensity. "It's not just about the plant. There are thousands of us now, all across the Empire. Young scientists, engineers, students. We've seen what Earth shows is possible. We can't go back to believing that sterility equals progress." The sound of heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor. Emily grabbed the jade plant, hiding it in her diplomatic pouch. "Come with me. I can request asylum for you." But Kexlar was already deleting files from his system. "No. I need to stay. More of us are waking up every day. The Empire's foundation is built on the idea that progress requires control, that life must be simplified to be managed. Earth proves that's wrong. That knowledge, it's like a seed itself. It grows wherever it lands." The door burst open. Environmental security officers in enhanced suits stormed in, their scanners sweeping the room. Emily backed away, clutching her diplomatic pouch. Her immunity protected her from search, but she could only watch as they arrested Kexlar. As they led him away, he managed one last message. Tell your people, tell Earth, you've given us hope. The Empire claims to pursue perfection, but they've shown us something better. You show us life in all its beautiful complexity. That evening, as Emily filed her report to Earth's diplomatic corps, she added a personal note. What we're seeing isn't just cultural exchange. It's cultural transformation. The Empire's youth aren't just fascinated by Earth's biodiversity. They're revolutionized by it. Every Earth species they encounter, every natural system they study, contradicts their society's core beliefs. We didn't need to conquer the Zaxian Empire. We just needed to show them a different way to live. Dr. Michael Thompson stood before the Imperial Science Academy's assembled elite, acutely aware that his next words could either bridge their civilizations or deepen the growing divide. The massive amphitheater was filled with Zaxians in their gleaming environmental suits, their attention fixed on the holographic display behind him. Today, he began, I want to show you something that changed human engineering forever. The hologram shifted to show a humpback whale breaching the ocean's surface. This creature weighs 40 tons, yet it can move with more grace and efficiency than our best submersibles. A murmur ran through the audience, their suits' vents cycling rapidly, and what Michael had learned was their expression of intense interest or discomfort. Probably both in this case. Now, watch its flippers. The hologram zoomed in, showing the whale's distinctive tubercles, the bumps along the leading edge of its flippers. For years, our engineers thought smooth surfaces were most efficient. Nature knew better. These bumps create specialized vortices that reduce drag and increase lift. When we copied this design for our wind turbines, their efficiency increased by 32%. An elder scientist stood, his suit markings indicating high rank. You propose we should copy primitive organisms rather than design superior solutions. Michael smiled. Nature had a 3.8 billion year head start on us. Every living species is the result of countless iterations of design, tested in the harshest conditions imaginable. Why not learn from that? He shifted the display to show a shark's skin under microscope. Look at these microscopic scales called dermal denticles. They reduce drag so effectively that copying them for ship hulls cut fuel consumption by 15%. When we made swimsuits with this pattern, they were so efficient they had to be banned in professional competition. The presentation continued, each example more compelling than the last. Michael showed them how maple seeds inspired better wind turbine designs, how peacock feathers led to advances in photonic crystals, how the Namib desert beetle's shell structure revolutionized water collection in arid regions. But it was the slime mold that truly shook them. This organism, Michael said, displaying a time-lapse of Physarum polycephalum solving a maze, has no brain, no central nervous system. Yet when we presented it with oat flakes arranged to match the locations of Tokyo's major cities, it created a network almost identical to the existing Japanese rail system. Engineers had spent years optimizing that network, and this primitive organism matched their solution in hours. A younger Zaxian broke protocol to speak out. But these are isolated examples, surely. Actually, Michael projected a new image, a split screen showing the branching patterns of tree roots, river deltas, and human blood vessels. These patterns appear everywhere in nature. We're finding that the solutions to our most complex problems already exist in the living world. Nature solved it first. We just need to be humble enough to learn. The recording of his presentation went viral across Zaxian networks within hours. Imperial censors tried to contain it, but each attempt only increased its popularity. Young Zaxians began secretly meeting to watch Earth nature documentaries, sharing them like contraband. A week later, Michael received an encrypted message from a group calling themselves the Biological Liberation Front. They'd used his presentation as inspiration to start experimenting with controlled ecosystem restoration on abandoned mining worlds. Your words about nature solving problems first. They've changed everything. The message read, "We were taught that progress meant controlling nature, simplifying it. But you've shown us that the greatest technological achievements come from understanding complexity, not eliminating it. As Michael prepared for another lecture, his datapad buzzed with news. The first successful unauthorized rewilding project had taken root on a Zaxian colony world. The Empire had already dispatched forces to destroy it, but they were too late. The images were spreading faster than they could be censored. Pictures of green shoots breaking through sterile soil, of insects pollinating flowers for the first time in centuries on a Zaxian world. Nature solved it first, Michael whispered to himself, smiling as he watched the revolution he'd helped spark continue to grow. Like the life forms he studied, this movement was adapting, evolving, and proving impossible to contain. The Empire was about to learn what Earth had discovered long ago. Life finds a way. Colonel Rachel Harrison had seen enough combat to know when an enemy was hiding a weakness. As Earth's military attaché to the Empire, she'd spent months watching the Zaxians' increasingly aggressive responses to what they called biological contamination. Now, reviewing footage from their latest crackdown on a rewilding project, she finally understood why. "Play it again," she commanded her AI assistant. The holographic display showed environmental security forces burning a nascent forest on colony world Zax 742. But it was what happened after the flames died that caught her attention. Freeze frame. Magnify Sector 7. The image zoomed in on the scorched earth. Tiny cracks spider-webbed across the surface, extending far beyond the burned area. The pattern was familiar. She'd seen something similar in reports from Earth's own agricultural history. Cross-reference with the Dust Bowl documentation from the 1930s, she muttered, and the eye overlaid historical images. The match was undeniable. Her secure comm chimed. "Colonel Harrison." It was Crix-Ta, one of Michael Thompson's former students. The young Zaxian scientist's voice carried the metallic tinge of someone speaking through an unauthorized channel. "We need your help. They're about to execute a mass purge of all experimental biodiversity zones." Rachel's fingers flew across her haptic interface, pulling up satellite data from across the Empire. The pattern of soil degradation was everywhere, hidden beneath their artificial environments, but spreading like a cancer. "I know why they're so afraid," she said. "Your worlds are dying, aren't they? The monoculture is failing." Crix-Ta's translator crackled with static. "Yes, our artificial ecosystems lack resilience. Each generation of engineered crops requires more resources to maintain. The soil is dead, nothing but a sterile growth medium. When one crop fails, there's nothing to fall back on." Rachel thought of Earth's own agricultural revolution, how diverse crop rotation and natural soil biology had saved lands once thought dead. "Your leaders know this. They've known for decades. It's why they're so desperate to suppress Earth's example. Our entire civilization is built on the principle that simplicity equals stability. If people learn that the opposite is true..." An alert flashed on Rachel's screen. Imperial forces were mobilizing. Not just security teams, but actual military units. "They're moving against the restoration sites," Crix-Ta said urgently. "Thousands of us have been working in secret, trying to introduce Earth-inspired biodiversity. If they destroy our work now..." Rachel made a quick decision. "Send me your coordinates. All of them. I'm going to show you something." She transmitted her analysis, showing how the Empire's sterile worlds were developing the same signs of systemic collapse that Earth had faced and overcome. "This isn't just about ideology anymore. It's about survival. The Council will never accept this," Crix-Ta warned. "They'd rather see the Empire fall than admit their fundamental principles are wrong." "Then we don't convince the Council." Rachel's hands moved across her interface, composing an emergency report to Earth. "We show everyone else. Your people aren't stupid. They can see what's happening to their worlds. They just need to understand there's an alternative." The next few hours were chaos. As Imperial forces descended on the restoration sites, the rebels launched their counterstrike. Not with weapons, but with information. Proof of the Empire's collapsing ecosystems flooded every communication channel. Evidence of successful biodiversity experiments went viral. Images of living soil versus dead spread across colonial networks. They're calling for mass demonstrations, Crick's reported. Not just students and scientists. Now, farmers, agricultural workers, colonial administrators, everyone who's watched their world slowly die under the Empire's policies. Rachel watched the uprising spread across her tactical display. The Empire had built its power on control and uniformity, but their own worlds were teaching them the same lesson Earth had learned. Life thrives through diversity, adaptation, and change. Your Empire's facing a choice, she told Crick's. Adapt or collapse. And thanks to you and the other rebels, they can't hide from that choice anymore. The revolution that followed wasn't fought with weapons. It was fought with seeds, soil samples, and scientific truth. The Empire had spent centuries trying to impose order on nature. Now, nature itself was teaching them the true meaning of power. Professor James Anderson stood at the viewport of the Zaxian mining colony Outpost 317, watching clouds gather over the world's first authorized rewilding zone. Besides him, Imperial Observer Mexfon's environmental suit whirred as its sensors analyzed the changing atmosphere. You understand, Mexfon said, if this fails, the reformist movement will lose all credibility. The traditionalists will use it as proof that their way is the only way. James nodded, his eyes fixed on the distant horizon, where the gray wasteland met the first patches of engineered grassland. That's why we're not rushing it. Nature's good at fixing things, but she needs time and the right tools. Below them, autonomous drones released carefully selected microorganisms into the soil. Each species had been chosen through months of research, organisms that could survive in the harsh environment while gradually transforming it. It was ecological succession accelerated by technology, guided by science. Your soil analysis team is reporting unusual readings, Mexfon noted, bringing up a holographic display. The bacterial counts are concerning. James smiled. Those aren't concerning. They're encouraging. Look at the nitrogen fixation rates. The mycorrhizal networks are establishing faster than we projected. Life wants to thrive here. We just have to let it. A warning klaxon sounded through the facility. James checked his tablet. Atmospheric sensors had detected the first rain in 3 centuries about to fall on the test zone. Years of careful seeding of the upper atmosphere with engineered bacteria was finally paying off. We should get to the bunker, Mexfon said nervously. Our environmental protocols are based on old assumptions, James interrupted gently. Come with me to the observation dome. I want you to see this. They stood in the transparent dome, watching as the first drops fell on soil that hadn't felt rain since the Empire had stripped this world for mining. The ground seemed to shudder, like something long dormant was awakening. When Earth faced its own ecological crisis, James explained, we learned something crucial. You can't control nature, but you can work with it. Every species we introduced here was selected not just for its individual properties, but for how it works with others. Through high-powered scopes, they could see the rain-activating dormant seeds that had been waiting for this moment. Engineered to germinate quickly, but designed based on native species from the planet's archaeological record, they represented a bridge between what was and what could be. The Empire's greatest fear, James continued, was that complexity meant chaos. But look at what's happening. Those plants aren't just growing randomly. They're following patterns encoded in their DNA by millions of years of evolution. The same patterns we see on Earth, on every living world. A junior scientist burst into the dome, their suit lights flashing with excitement. Professor, the soil samples. We're detecting active nutrient cycling. The food web is establishing itself. James nodded, unsurprised. Life finds a way. We've seen it on Earth in places we thought were dead forever. Chernobyl, the Korean DMZ, even the deep ocean vents. Life doesn't just survive. It creates conditions that support more life. Mexfon's suit fence cycled rapidly as he processed this. And you believe this can work on all our worlds, even the fully terraformed ones. With modifications for each environment, yes. We're not trying to replicate Earth's ecosystems. We're using Earth's principles to help your worlds develop their own. James brought up a display showing similar projects ready to launch on other Imperial worlds. The key is understanding that stability doesn't come from simplicity. It comes from relationships. The rain was falling harder now, and with it decades of toxic dust were being washed away. But more importantly, something else was being washed away. The Empire's fear of the living world. Your people built incredible things, James said softly. Now it's time to learn to build with nature instead of against it. This isn't the end of Imperial technology. It's the beginning of Imperial ecology. As they watched, a faint green tinge began to spread across the test zone. It wasn't just plants growing. It was hope taking root in soil that had been dead for centuries. The Empire was learning what Earth had discovered long ago. True power lies not in control, but in cooperation with the forces that make all life possible. Dr. Lisa Walker had seen a lot of strange things in her career as a xenoecologist, but nothing quite prepared her for the sight of Times Square, filled with Zaxians who had voluntarily removed their environmental suits. They stood among the crowds, their bioluminescent skin pulsing with patterns of excitement as they watched the massive screens broadcast the formation of the Galactic Coalition. "It's still hard to believe," said Ambassador Krixta, who had once been a student rebel and was now Earth's primary liaison to the transformed Empire. His skin flickered blue-green with contentment. 20 years ago, we thought exposure to other organisms meant death. Now we understand it meant rebirth. Lisa watched as the screens showed live feeds from across former Imperial space. On world after world, the sterile environments of the past were being replaced by vibrant managed ecosystems. Each planet was developing its own unique biosphere, guided by the principles Earth had shared but shaped by local conditions and needs. The latest reports from Colony ZAC 742 are in, she said, checking her datapad. The soil regeneration has exceeded all projections. They're recording thousands of new species interactions daily. Life isn't just returning, it's evolving. A cheer went up from the crowd as the coalition charter was signed. The document formally dissolved the old empire and established a new order based on principles of biological and cultural diversity. But more importantly, it acknowledged a fundamental truth, that life itself was the greatest technology of all. "Dr. Walker," a young voice called out. Lisa turned to see a group of Zaxian children, their skin patterns showing the rapid shifts of youth. Like most of their generation, they had been born with enhanced immune systems, the result of careful genetic engineering that worked with nature instead of against it. "Tell us about the butterflies again." Lisa smiled, remembering that first contact meeting so many years ago. Well, there was this ambassador in his environmental suit, and this brave little glasswing butterfly. Her story was interrupted by an urgent message on her comm. The first fully restored Zaxian colony world, the one Professor Anderson had used as his pilot project, was showing unprecedented results. The artificial rain had triggered something unexpected. Dormant native species, preserved in the soil for centuries, were beginning to emerge. "Life finds a way," Krixta said, reading the message over her shoulder. "Just as your Dr. Thompson always said." The screens above Times Square switched to a live feed of the colony world. Gasps of wonder rose from the crowd as they watched sheets of rain fall on flowering fields that had been desert just decades ago. Insects, some engineered, some evolved, all part of the new ecosystem, danced through the air. Lisa's comm chimed again. This message was different, personal, encoded with a signature she hadn't seen in 20 years. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. "It's from Krelvox," she said softly. "The scout who first discovered Earth." She read aloud. "I watched the rain fall on my world, see the colors return to soil we thought forever dead, And I remember the first time I saw your blue planet. We thought we were discovering a scientific anomaly. Instead, we found our salvation. Thank you for showing us that the universe is more beautiful with complexity. Around them, the celebration continued. Humans and Zaxians mingled freely, sharing stories and dreams for the future. Above, the screen showed more images from across Coalition space. Forest canopies spreading across once barren worlds, oceans teeming with engineered and evolved life, cities that worked with nature instead of against it. You know what the best part is? Krixta said, his skin glowing with the deep purple of profound emotion. We're just beginning. Each world we restore becomes a new experiment in life's possibilities. Every species that adapts or evolves teaches us something new. The Empire tried to create perfect order through control. Instead, we found perfection in diversity. As if to emphasize his point, a butterfly, one of the thousands now thriving in New York's restored urban ecosystem, landed on a nearby Zaxian child. Instead of flinching, the child laughed with delight, their skin mimicking the butterfly's wing patterns. Lisa watched the moment unfold, thinking of all the changes that had brought them here. Earth hadn't destroyed the Empire with weapons or warfare. It had transformed it with something far more powerful, the truth about life itself. The Empire had been built on the idea that progress meant control. Earth had shown them that real progress meant embracing the beautiful complexity of life in all its forms. And that, she realized, was just the beginning.